The Matt Gaetz story is getting significantly more interesting and significantly worse for Matt Gaetz. To catch you up, a Republican congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz, is now in the middle of investigations into very serious possible crimes, including child sex trafficking. Every time Gaetz speaks to try to plead his innocence, he seems to present new derogatory information about himself. He presents new possible crimes that at least some of us didn't even know he was under investigation for. And we have now learned, thanks to an investigation from the New York Times, that Matt Gaetz sought a preemptive blanket pardon from Donald Trump at the end of Donald Trump's term. Now, in retrospect, we know that at the time that Matt Gaetz sought this pardon from Donald Trump, Gaetz was already under investigation. We don't know whether Gaetz knew that. Was it Gaetz knowing he was under investigation that caused him to seek the pardon from Donald Trump? Or was it Gaetz knowing he had committed crimes and wasn't sure whether they would ever be investigated that caused him to ask Donald Trump for a pardon? The New York Times reports that, quote, in the final weeks of Trump's term, Gaetz sought something in return for his unending brown-nosing support of Matt Gaetz. That's of Donald Trump. That's my editorializing. Gaetz privately asked the White House for blanket preemptive pardons for himself and for unidentified congressional allies for any crimes they may have committed. Around this time, Gaetz was publicly calling for broad pardons from Trump to thwart what he termed the, quote, bloodlust of their political opponents. Justice Department investigators had begun questioning Gaetz' associates about his conduct, including whether he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old, which violated child sex trafficking laws, in an inquiry that grew out of the case of an indicted associate in Florida. Now, here's the key line, as I mentioned. It is unclear whether Gaetz or the White House knew at the time that Gaetz was under such an investigation. It is unclear who else Gaetz wanted pardons for. He didn't tell the White House he was under investigation. Whether or not he knew it remains a question. But according to the New York Times, White House lawyers and officials viewed the request for a preemptive pardon as a non-starter that would set a bad precedent. The latest idea is when Gaetz asked for a pardon for himself and others, the and others might have been a way to camouflage his own criminality. In other words, if I know that I have committed certain crimes or maybe under investigation for certain crimes, but I don't want to call attention to that, I could go to Trump and say, sir, as he claims people do, myself and a group of my colleagues are all going to be persecuted for being a supporter of yours. Pardon all of us. And you frame it as a preemptive protection from like political prosecutions, knowing that really the reason you want the pardon is because you may have broken child sex trafficking laws. And maybe you even know that you're under investigation. It's certainly an idea. And that is what some Trump associates are speculating went on. Now, ultimately, Matt Gaetz didn't get it. As I told you, people around Donald Trump thought that a preemptive blanket pardon for Matt Gaetz would not be a good look, and it was not something that Donald Trump ultimately granted. So there's a few different layers to this. Obviously, there's the superficial layer of, asking for pardons in advance does not project innocence. That's someone with a guilty mind. And of course, that's true. The counter would be from the right that if you're anticipating bogus political charges, you would look for a blanket pardon as protection, not because you know you committed a crime, but because you anticipate that people from the other political party are going to come after you. That's just an argument, right? Both sides have a talking point, and it sort of becomes just an argument about the talking point. The bigger picture here is, it certainly seems as though Matt Gaetz must be heading to a massive historic downfall of epic proportions based on what continues to be learned every single day. He goes on Tucker Carlson to clear his name. He further incriminates himself. He says, my travel records will exonerate me. They raise even more questions. Now we learn he was looking for a preemptive pardon. at every opportunity, it seems to get worse. And logic would point to this guy's got to be going down. But maybe not. Quite frankly, I think it is almost as likely that this guy has a shot at being a prominent Republican, who knows, presidential nominee. With the modern Republican Party, you can never really tell what they will punish versus what they will reward. And although clearly all signs continue to point to Gaetz is in a hell of a mess of trouble here, how on earth does he get out of this one? At the same time, this is the Republican Party that we're dealing with. And they are very quick to demand consequences for those on the left, but not for those on the right. This is an area where this is almost like a critique of the Democratic Party. Sometimes the Democratic Party, in order to show how they don't care who's doing the wrongdoing, the Democratic Party has sometimes been too quick to demand punishment for those on the Democratic side in order to show how not biased they are. Arguably, the Al Franken situation is such an example. So Gaetz might end up never being heard from again and resigning in shame or losing re-election, going to prison. Who the hell knows? Or Gaetz might end up as the vice presidential nominee in 2024. Nothing would surprise me at this point in time. A lot of the shirts you see me wearing on YouTube are actually made by a company called Teddy Stratford. I love these shirts, and that's why I asked them to be a sponsor of the show. It really is the most innovative shirt you can buy, because most slim fit button-up shirts give you this weird stretched out gap in the chest where the buttons are. You don't get that with the Teddy Stratford shirts because all of their shirts come with a patented zipper hidden beneath the buttons, which prevents the chest from stretching apart like that. But most importantly, just overall, it makes the shirt fit much better and look better. The carefully designed shirt is also cut in a way that improves the look of your upper body physique. It has a really nice, elegant, close fit that other shirts don't really give you. It also has a specially designed collar that won't fall down and lay flat, which I love. The difference all around with these shirts really is noticeable. Go check them out at davidpakman.com/Teddy. The link is down below, and they'll give you 15% off your first order if you use the coupon code Pakman at checkout.